FAVMI presents Unfolding Mental Illness, hosted by Saraswati Suresh.
Hello, everyone. FAVMI, Family's Voice on Mental Illness, which is also the Mumbai regional chapter of Face Me India, Families Alliance on Mental Illness, presents its podcast episodes, Unfolding Mental Illness. We hope through these podcasts to provide tools, resources, inputs from experts, insights to our family carers who have their loved ones suffering from some kind of mental illness and provide them better understanding and resilience in their journey. If you are a family member who has their loved ones suffering with some kind of mental illness, do subscribe to us, listen to us, share it with your friends, and join our community. It would be a pleasure to have all your friends join us in this journey with us. Thank you very much for listening to all our earlier subscribers, and we hope you're liking our podcast. Please keep sharing your feedbacks also to us. 10 September is recognized as the Suicide Prevention Day internationally. And so therefore we decided to do this podcast. And our topic for today is Hope After Darkness, Conversations on Suicide Prevention. Before we start this episode, I would like to share some statistics on suicide prevention, on deaths due to suicide, actually. And according to the National Crime Bureau records of India, they have recorded 171,000 deaths due to suicide in 2022. And this has increased by 2% in India. And what is more alarming actually is on 28th August 24 at the annual IC3 conference and expo of 2024, they have released a report which is on student suicide and epidemic sweeping India. And they say that the student suicides has increased by 4% from 6,654 to 13,044, which is actually double. And that is an alarming number which we are talking about. And this is actually shocking because we are talking about the youth of our country. And therefore, it's very important that we have this conversation and we bring about more and more awareness amongst all of us on this subject. And we hope that through this conversation, we'll be able to shed light and bring it from the darkness and help people who are struggling in this phase or journey in which they are. I'd like to introduce our speaker for this, somebody who's an amazing person and who agreed to do this podcast on a very short notice, and my heartfelt gratitude to her. Welcome, Supriya.
My pleasure.
So I am Saraswati Suresh, the founder of FAVMI, the host of today, and I welcome also my co-host, Dr. Sachin Kanokar, the founder, member, and director of FAVMI. To introduce Supriya, she has been in this space of for many years together. She's a clinical psychologist primarily, and she has two foundations, organizations under which she runs. One is the Essence Psychology Cognitive Tech Private Limited, which delivers highly evidence-based programs related to social, cognitive, emotional, and behavioral learning. And the second one, which is a nonprofit, which is Shahid Major Rajesh Nair Foundation, that leads the SPAR initiatives to tackle the pressing national concern of premature mobility attributed to suicide. She has chaired, executed many prestigious projects with UNESCO and WHO, and is an active member of the Global Clinical Practice Network of the WHO. She's also been on the panel of the project initiated by United Nations for mental health in rural areas. She is a TEDx speaker and works extensively with the LGBTQI community too. She has conducted several gatekeeper training programs for suicide prevention, and through her SPAR initiative, the organization has carried out active risk assessment, rescue, and refer for over 2,500 individuals on risk for suicide since the last 3 years after its inception. Her credentials are actually much more, I just highlighted a few of them, and I
Just,
really thank
just being very kind.
Supriya
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
You're just being very, very kind, Saraswati. This is just an accumulated work for, it's not just my work, it's my team's work too, including you. I know that you've been a volunteer with a lot of our gatekeeper programs. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
So let's
Yes,
start with the conversation and let's take this forward. Yeah.
absolutely.
So Supriya, let's start with the very basic, whenever we hear our loved one or a family member or a friend or someone who comes and talks about their suicide thoughts or suicide ideation, most of the times we just shrug it, you know or we do not lay too much importance, or it's a very difficult conversation. So how does a family member or a friend actually approach this conversation? How do they take this forward and help that person?
Right. So I think that we can start with understanding how to recognize suicide in a bit, but assuming that someone has already started understanding that someone has suicidal ideations, or they don't even need to verbalize it that I'm experiencing suicidal thoughts. There are a lot of other ways for family members also to understand what suicidal ideations, how suicidal ideations will look, because in the work that we do, we continuously educate people that suicide ideations do not necessarily only take the root of words. The ideations can be projected through other science, emotional science, behavioral science, cognitive science. We'll come to that in a bit. But once someone knows that someone is experiencing suicidal ideations, there are quite a few things that they can do. Especially, I'm going to also share what someone gave us an acronym called Believe. So that's also something that I'm going to share. So I would like to share signs that you can recognize even when someone is not ideating. I would like to share what we do once someone starts ideating, what kind of questions you can ask, what are the things you can say. But primarily, empathy is an extremely non-judgmental empathy is an extremely critical factor that can save lives. So quick action, empathy, and non-judgmental approach to any person's suicidal ideation is an extremely important antidote, and we can save really precious lives. And remember, each life lost to suicide is a tragedy, whether it's a young person, whether it's an old person, each suicide is a tragedy. It has devastating effects on communities, families, and also to the person who has attempted or the person who has completed the act. We know that the person must have gone through tremendous amount of distress before they actually took that action. So it's extremely important to recognize these signs. And believe you me, everyone can make a difference, and everyone can make a significant difference to this pandemic that we are facing, right? So I hope that answers your question, Saraswati.
Okay, yeah, sure. So basically, empathy, being judgmental, and trying to help the person.
Quick action. Yes,
Quick
quick
action.
action.
Yeah.
Yes, quick action is very important. And we'll take a look at what quick action means,
Okay.
right? Because a lot of people just think that talking is enough. Though sometimes talking is enough, but sometimes that's not. So quick action is extremely important, and we'll talk about what quick action means.
Okay. Okay. So you also mentioned that there would be signs also when you were speaking. So I mean, I would thought that it's a spur of the moment. The person just gets vulnerable, and it's at the spur of the moment that they go ahead to attempt to suicide. But
It does look like a spur of moment because it seems like an impulsive action. Some
huh,
s- some actions of suicidal completions can be impulsive, but many a times it isn't. There are a lot of times that people have contemplated. Sometimes they have actually contemplated, moved back, given up the idea, contemplated, moved back, given up the idea. Sometimes they contemplate, attempt, and then just it's a feeble, thankfully feeble attempt. But someday that actually the crisis hasn't resolved, the mental illness hasn't resolved. The underlying reasons why people ideate suicide still persist. And then with each attempt, the risk actually increases because it's in fact a risk factor. Every attempt someone who's struggling realizes that probably there is no other alternative. It's a erroneous, distorted thinking that there is no other alternative. But please remember that this erroneous, disturbed thinking is not because they are in some way inferior. It is because at that point in time they're struggling with distress or struggling with mental health concerns. And mental illness is like any other illness, right? If I have jaundice, nobody can come and say, and nobody should come and say, hey, listen, snap out of your jaundice, right? Or if I have a fractured leg, people don't come and say things like, just try to walk a bit and you'll be fine, right? So any mental illness is very, very similar to physical illness too. And that awareness actually is an extremely important step. So yes, you're right. It does look like sometimes it's a spur of the moment action, but a lot of ruminating thinking, uh, a lot of signs are something that they give without their, needing to give them signs. And sometimes they actually go and cry for help. And those are the things that we, in fact, if our families and communities recognize, it might be helpful. So to remember, I mean, before we go into this, who's a gatekeeper, So we'll talk about gatekeepers, but everyone is a gatekeeper of someone else. So we all have the responsibility towards each other. There's not one person who's ideating suicide and we all are helping them. We all have the potential to have crisis, and we all have the risk to some extent or the other to probably ideate or attempt or complete the act. And we all have therefore a responsibility to take care of each other.
So how do we recognize these early warning signs then?
That'd be lovely. So shall I share my screen? Maybe a visual
Yes.
cue could actually help viewers.
Understand it better, sure.
Yes. Can you see my screen, Saraswati? Yes. Thank you. So we're going to immediately talk about the early signs. There are three things that happen. People talk. That doesn't mean people talk in the same language, in the sense of not language, but the same way. But people do talk. A lot of people who contemplate suicide do talk about things like, I don't feel like living any longer. A very important component is feeling hopeless. They say things like, I can't see my future. Or they say things like, मुझे कल क्या होने वाला है और उसका कोई अंदाज नहीं है. I feel extremely hopeless. Whatever I try is not going to work. Now these might be signs of something else too, but it's important to understand that these are important signs to check further for. So, of course, when they speak about killing themselves, that's a direct sign, and we need to absolutely take it seriously. Or they say things like, I don't have any reason to live. I'm just pulling from one day to the other. I just feel meaningless. I just feel trapped. I'm experiencing unbearable pain. I don't know what to do with it. So the cultural language they're using, मुझे पता नहीं इस ये दर्द होता है, लेकिन वो दर्द जैसा नहीं है. मैं बता नहीं सकती और बता नहीं सकता कि कैसा दर्द है वो. So these are the ambiguous ways that they'll communicate that they're experiencing psychological or mental trauma. Or they may say things like, मैं किसी के ऊपर बोझ हूँ. I am a burden to others. I don't want to be a burden to others. All of these are our first signs to initiate the next step. And when you initiate the next step and you say, hey, this wasn't a sign of suicide, then you can take another path. But there's a large portion of people who will probably be saved if we are recognizing these as signs. Other signs behaviors are increased use of alcohol or drugs, because they want to drown their pain. See, remember, a lot of suicide ideations come out of pain, psychological pain. And if you place a very hot potato in someone's hand, the first impulse, and of course it's a reflex, but first impulse is to drop it, right? So one of the very intense pain impulses is to just end it in some way. They don't want to end their lives, remember, they want to end their pain. And when we are helping others, we require to understand that it's manifesting that they want to end their pain. But in reality, if we help them recognize that it's the pain that they are wanting to end, and that's where we can focus, and people have been able to get over pain. So pain is an extremely important factor that we must consider while we are helping them. So psychological pain being the one that we're talking right now. They look for means. One of the ways that we actually at a sectorial, multi-sectorial level, we could do something, and we have been trying to do something, is recognizing search engine, the searches that people put in. And if you see now, it's becoming even very better that if you put a search, you'll first not get an explanation about means of suicide, but like get it, the first thing that will pop up is a helpline, and which is where we should all go towards. Every we need to categorize and index suicidal, index suicidal words. Just I'm taking a kind of a small break here, and we're trying to do something at the level of Maharashtra government where we are trying to index a lot of ways in the way in which culturally people, because for example, a person who's coming from a rural India will not say things like my heart, I'm feeling as if they're not going to articulate it in a very sophisticated English way. They'll say things like मुझे कुछ बोझ लगता है, मुझे heavy लगता है. So they use words like heavy, and those are very strong indicators. Or they'll withdraw from activities, the things that they used to enjoy doing previously. They would just stop doing it. So one of the things that is people say that these morning grandfathers, grandmothers go in the morning and do these laughing clubs and all that stuff. I mean, does it really help mental health? Of course, it must be having a direct impact on it. It does. But the fact that if they don't go every day, it's kind of a warning to people that, hey, Chaudhary Kaka did not come to for two days, and let's go and check on him. So all these community interactions that actually have a direct as well as an indirect or the protective way to help people. They sleep too much or too little are very similar signs to depression. They sometimes say goodbye. They go to loved ones and say, ऐसे ही बोल रहा हूँ, लेकिन I just want to say that in case we don't meet again. Or they give away their things, prized possessions. I would like you to have my books. The moment someone tries to give me their books, I actually get into the next action very quickly. And they realize that, then I realize that most of them are giving away their books because they don't have place in their house. I love books, but I've at least ruled it out. So they call me a mad woman, but I actually then don't ever make an exception. Someone giving away prized possessions, I actually do investigate. Or they experience fatigue. They say they're fatigued. And you'll see all kinds of moods. You'll see depression, you'll see anxiety, loss of interest, irritability. A lot of times, a risk factor is humiliation and shame. For example, they have experienced a big failure, perceived or real, big failure at work, or their spouses have left them, or their children have, communicated to them that they don't want to, interact with them any longer, they hate them, or whatever those experiences of humiliation. Those are very important signs. So you have emotional, you have behavioral, and you have verbal signs that some of it might happen. Not all of these signs will happen together. They will happen, some will happen on one day. The more the intense the experience of pain, the more the intense signs. So these are the extremely important signs that one can actually start getting tuned to. And if you see someone experiencing these signs, we take the next step.
Yes, we take the next step of empathy, call for action, and
Yes,
try to
and
have
that quick action is
quick
what we're going to
action.
talk. Yes, we are
Yes,
going to talk about that quick action now.
yeah.
So these are the warning signs, and we'll come to the risk factor a little later, Saraswati. But this is those quick actions that we're talking about. If you can see
Okay.
my full screen, it's called QPR. Like you get a heart attack, we do CPR. Exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing we do when you experience you see these warning signs. You do a QPR. You ask directly, hey, you seem to be really low, but I want to ask you, are you thinking of suicide? So, and you know that there are a lot of myths, right? One of the myths is that if you ask about suicide, you're going to plant the idea, and someone who's not thinking of suicide will suddenly start thinking about suicide, right? But that's a myth. You don't really, that doesn't really happen because our survival instincts are pretty high. And if we are not vulnerable, we are not at risk, then we don't suddenly start thinking about suicide because we have read about it, or we have, someone has asked whether you're thinking about suicide. So ask directly. Ask, are you thinking about suicide? We'll see how to ask. And directly ask about means and plan. If they say yes, ask them, have you thought about the way that you're planning to, complete the act? We don't ever say commit suicide because it's not a crime. Remember that. Commit is a word that we might want to discourage people to use because it immediately puts the burden of judgment on them, and it becomes someone committed suicide. No, they completed that. They died. No, nobody succeeds in suicide. I mean, it's not a success, it's a completion. I mean, it's a sad completion of an ideation and an attempt. So using words like you might be thinking about how you want to, act on your, thoughts. Don't use words like impulse, because it means as if you are being impulsive. That's not what we want to say. We want to say that you're thinking about something, and have you thought, or are you, or you can word things like, do your thoughts also include means of completing the act or attempting the act? And start talking to them about, empathetically, telling them that they understand their pain, but ask the means, ask the plan, remove the means. This is that quick action that we're talking about. Stay and listen, have 10 cups of coffees with them. Take them to if they want you to take a leave. It's all right. I mean, I'm not saying that it's all right for each and everyone. If you can't take a leave, but you're someone who, for example, you are a surgeon and you have a surgery to do, then replace and ensure that someone else is there with them who can take the responsibility of listening to them and being with them till you come back. Remove the means. That's that quick action that we are talking about, and refer and pursue first, of course, for them to go to take help, and then refer them, take active actions to find out professionals who will be able to actively help. So QPR is that quick action that you're talking about.
Excellent. I think this is ask, stay, listen, remove, means, persuade, and refer. The QPR. Yeah, I think it stayed in my head quite well. Yeah, thank you for this illustrative way of putting it across on how to do. So you mentioned about the myths just now when you were saying that in the first question, it's a myth to ask something like, what are the other myths or misconceptions?
Oh, there are quite a few. For example, people think that in case people are speaking about it, they'll not complete it. They'll say things like, "गरजने वाले बरसते नहीं हैं." So, लेकिन that's not applicable to people who have ideations. Or people say things like, एक बार attempt किया है उसने, it hasn't completed. Now he must have or she must have, got their lesson. But actually, a previous attempt increases the risk of another attempt. Or another belief that I have seen in my work is, if they would have been a little more religious, if they would have believed in God a little more, they would have realized that in case they actually die of suicide, they will, they will be brought back into this world in a worse life. So that's another myth, because one of the things that happens when people are distressed are that their judgment actually becomes impoverished. Their judgment, they struggle on judgment because they're so overwhelmed with pain that their frontal lobe isn't active. They're amygdala and hypothalamus is actually they've had a hijack, right? So they're experiencing tremendous amount of pain. So all of the thoughts that if this would have happened, they wouldn't have. Or another myth that I have encountered, which I continuously try to bust, is that bad parenting results in attempts of suicide. So then I asked them exactly to understand what they're trying to say, because probably I could stand corrected. What do they mean by bad parenting? So one of the very common things that I hear is either too permissive or too restrictive, because that's the only thing that they can come down to, saying bad parenting. Maybe they were too restrictive, or maybe they were too permissive. Um, yes, emotional education is an extremely important factor, and families who impart emotional education actually do have some, some protective way in which people then actually the numbers reduce. But too much permissive, bad parenting, too much scolding, giving everything, all of these have not shown to be the direct implicators of suicide. The direct implicators have been shown as the risk factors and protective factors we are going to talk about soon. So these are the very, very common myths, and that's what we talked about. Asking or talking about suicide will actually increase their risk. और औरतें ये सब नहीं करती, or men won't do such things. I mean, there is gender difference in the way that people attempt the act, but there is of course there is men are more prone in terms of certain kinds of stressors, but that also is a myth. It's not attributed to gender, it's attributed to the kind of stressors that people experience, right? So those are the kind of myths that are extremely important to recognize. Biases, belief systems about certain kinds of sections of society, biases towards we talked about gender, but biases towards age, those are like middle-aged men. They are completely protected, which it isn't true, right? In the Western countries, it's actually one of the very, very major risk uh, um, risk group of people. So the prevalence rate doesn't reduce there. So these are some of the myths that certainly we must challenge ourselves to have.
So true, I mean, we have also seen so many families, in the mental health space that we talk about, that bad parenting is one of the reasons, and with the guilt which the families go through, because of that. Yeah, I completely.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You're right, Saraswati. The survivors will experience so much of guilt saying that, hey, you, you were not a good gatekeeper. That's something that I've heard. You were not a good keeper. I mean, I'm going to share this. Very, very recently, a suicide happened in a very, very close, like very, very close member of ours. But the suicide ideations, signs and symptoms, etc., are very, very complicated. And they're very, very, sometimes families, the best of us can miss those signs. So it's extremely important just to keep at it, to keep on saving lives, and to keep on not blaming parents for bad parenting or something that they have done wrong. They really haven't.
Yeah.
The person must be going through a tremendous amount of either mental illness or tremendous amount of pain that they could not share, because sometimes the parents, look at this, sometimes people who have attempted and not thankfully not completed the act have communicated that one of the reasons I couldn't tell my parents is because they were such good human beings. They were such good parents. So now where does this explanation of a bad parent, come in? So they've repeatedly said that the inability to tell my parents is because they have been the best parents in the world, and I have just had no heart to tell them. But in that judgment problem, they thought that if I just complete the act, I wouldn't have to face the consequence of they facing it. So it's an erroneous thinking, it's a distorted thinking. But parenting and all that stuff is actually a myth we require to actually overcome them. Yeah.
So what is the role you think the family members or friends can play,
Yeah, a lot of roles. So I'm going to first talk about a little bit of risk and protective factors. Then we'll be able to understand the roles a little better.
Sure,
Like, for
sure.
example, previous attempts is a risk factor. History of depression, serious illness, job and financial loss, impulsive or aggressive behavior suddenly that happen is a risk factor. Sense of hopelessness, violence, victimization. Now, for example, groups of people who have experienced victimization, like for example, people from the LGBTQI community who have experienced a lot of discrimination and trauma, can actually have a higher risk of ideations. Therefore, special populations who require really lot of care because they've been traumatized and they have experienced a lot of humiliation, actually require a little more support from families and communities. We require to have more outreach programs for first identify the communities that are vulnerable. Rural communities are more vulnerable because of the access to mental health is low. So people who've been bullied, people who had another experience of suicide themselves experience ideations a little more commonly than the others. Loss of relationships, people who have just broken relationships, divorces, separations, loss of child, all of those are again very important risk factors. The community risk factors, because before we go to this question as what parents and community can do, one of the things we need to remember is we have lack of access to healthcare. So even with you're a volunteer in the work that we do, we have done so much, it's still so less. So the access itself is low. The fundings to these programs are low. Community violence, historical trauma, discrimination, a stigma attached with other things, stigma attached to just accessing help. All of these actually prove to be a risk factor, but some protective factors are how to teach effective coping and problem solving skills, so that when people experience the crisis or the stress, people, the first action, that quick action they can take is to be able to say that, okay, and continuously hammer it in their minds, to youth especially, because that's a very vulnerable and accessible. You can actually just move to colleges and schools and do this program, right? So they're accessible. One of the things that we can actually get them to say to themselves when there is a crisis is every problem is solvable. If it isn't solvable, we can change the way in which we approach the problem. No problem or no situation is worth having these ideations. Or if I can't solve it myself, I know that there will be help available. Even if the help is not available in immediate family, there will be help available in some way or the other. These thoughts of suicide are actually temporary for me. Again, there's another myth that people say that, when we say things to them is like the suicide is a permanent solution to a temporary problem. And I know what they're trying to say, but this is a bit of a judgmental role because they're not realizing at that point in time that this problem is temporary. It does seem like a huge problem that is unsolvable. So the coping skills required to help them establish that I can and I will be able to manage this over a period of time, even if not immediately, at least with someone, if not with my family members, and over a period of time, not necessarily immediately, over a period of time, I should be able to help myself cope with this. Cultural identities are extremely important. Support from parents and family is important. Availability of consistent physical and behavioral health. We require to have some policy decisions. I'm hoping that we can do that in the next 3-4 years because there's a lot of work being done on that. Is availability of consistent behavioral and physical health centers, and of course, society protective factors like reduced access to means. I have this wonderful, I won't take the name of this specific village, but wonderful example of a village where they lock, in fact, in many villages do now, but they lock their pesticides. If the farmer wants the pesticide, they actually have to fill a form, talk to the tehsildar or the sarpanch. The sarpanch will find out and then just give those, assess whether the need is real or not. When did they last spray pesticides, and the pesticides are, they do not have access to pesticides, right? So reducing means to lethal access to lethal means is actually a very important step society can take, communities can take. So Saraswati, do you want me to talk about how to do the QPR, because we are related now, right now we are talking about how communities can help or
Yes.
family can help.
Yeah, you can continue.
So first we have asked whether you're thinking of suicide. If they say yes, and if you suspect that they're saying no, but they don't mean it, be gentle and still say it's all right to talk to me about it. Typically, my volunteers ask me if it's okay to say that even I have thought about it sometime, for which the answer is no, because you don't know how this answer will go. Will it be interpreted as, okay, if even a volunteer who's working in the suicide mission can think about it, I mean, I can always think about it and it's all right to do that. Don't normalize suicidal ideation. Absolutely don't normalize it. It's okay for people to think about suicide, is not a statement we want to use. We want to use, it is understandable that people can think about suicide, not that it is okay. Because the if it's a vulnerable mind, that okay will be taken as a approval of their suicidal ideations. We're neither disapproving nor approving. We are ensuring we are not normalizing it. Talk to them about the fact that you do understand, have genuine validation, right? Try your best not to argue or rationalize them out, right? Hey, ऐसे सोचोगे तो कैसे चलेगा? Just start discouraging yourself to talk to them out of it, because that's going to alienate them. I understand this. Tell me more. Okay, are you? So right now, your role is to ask whether there are suicidal ideations, ask whether there is plan, reduce access to means, persuade them to take help, and refer them. So ensure that you're keeping them safe right now. Your job is not to change them from suicidal ideation to no ideations, because family members and gatekeepers right now don't have that tool. You don't know sometimes you will know, you probably are wiser than many, but some people may not know that there is a way of dissuading. They may think that how to dissuade is to tell them how foolish they are, or to tell them how painful it's going to be for their parents, or what a stupid act that is. So just don't get into argument or rationalization. Your job and the best optimum way to save a person from ideation attempt and completing the act is to be able to help them understand that you understand. You reduce the means, stay with them, ensure that you have taken the means away from them, and ensure that they have not only taken mental professional help, but also follow it up. Along with them, create a safety plan. So in the next 5, 7 days, would you certainly ensure that you're not surrounded by whatever means they talked about? And media wise, I mean, it's a media guideline today. Also, we are not going to talk about means directly, right? So you will say things like, okay, you thought about ABC. Will you ensure that ABC isn't there? Will you ensure that we have access to all your ABCs? Have you removed all your ABCs from your vicinity and remove those ABCs? Reduce those access to means. Would you, and just persuade them, would you come with me, accompany them to the mental health professionals, sit out, have two cups of coffee, don't enter the room, you don't need to, you just can sit out, ensure that they are being handed over to people who can care. If you are not going to be able to be there till the time that the professional tells you that the risk is now mitigated, the risk is now minimized, and we can start weaning them out from the continuous support that the person is requiring. And they might have a lot of myths about mental health professionals because we know that there are some mental health professionals who may say the wrong thing at the wrong time. They're also human beings. They may say the wrong thing at the wrong time, and sometimes it actually acts as a deterrent for them. But dispel the myth. Remember, some help is better than no help. Right? If you as a loved one understand that this professional is not a fit for this person, change the professional. You don't have to, you don't have a bond with, I mean, contract and bond signed with a professional. Keep on looking for more professional help till you feel that this is a fit, you know. So I hope that helps.
This is a beautiful slide. I loved it.
And that, and this is that belief that I was saying. So
Yes, I was just going to ask you, what is that acronym?
yeah,
Absolutely.
that's belief. Believe that
Yeah.
suicide comments or gestures are serious. Take each and every one of them seriously. Engage in conversations about thoughts and feelings. Listen without judgment. Don't argue. Don't try to get them out of the thinking. That's not something you might be able to do it right now. You might succeed, but don't take that risk. Investigate intent and access to legal means. Express empathy. Validate how difficult and painful it is for them because it truly is, and encourage them to seek support.
Oh, this is amazing. Yeah. Yeah. And it is simple, actually, if you go through the process.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So one of my actually people that I was working with, Saraswati, just made a mention saying that, hey, you don't, how do we don't ever, I will never get a practice on this because you don't encounter this every day.
Yeah.
So for that, I say that yes, practice in front of the mirror. Okay,
Correct.
be ready. So firefighters do this every day, right? They don't expect to encounter a fire every day. More and more equipments are becoming safer. Firefighters will not encounter fire for maybe once in 3 years. That doesn't discourage them to keep practicing. So keep practicing, keep talking to yourself as to what will happen if my friend whom I love so much, I don't want them to lose their life. If they speak ABC, what would I say? How would I listen? Keep practicing in your head. One of them said that, hey, I will keep practicing, but will there anybody be for me to keep practicing? So say, okay, then that means our role expands and we encourage people to keep practicing. So our role just expands,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. This is a beautiful acronym and it's easy to follow for everybody and practice it out.
that's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
That's it. That's right.
So, and I'm sure that, the families can actually practice it with their loved ones and help them out in this fashion. Absolutely.
So let us summarize. Let's say the
Yeah.
families, all families, whoever we all for others. Okay, someone for me, but we all for others. So just to
Correct.
tell you that when someone asks me that you are working in the field of intervention, you are a mental health professional, you do a lot of cognitive work. Does it mean that your risk has decreases? My risk has decreased, but it is never nullified. It never becomes zero, really. Then what would you then act? But then when I am experiencing this, it's your duty to save me, right? So it is my duty, of course, not duty, but responsibility is a good word. Responsibility to, of course, wade my way out through it. And I can take that responsibility and do take that responsibility in my right now sane mind, rational state. But if I get into a really traumatic state, it is possible that I might need someone's help. So what I mean by saying is we all are vulnerable and we all have a role to play and we all can take the responsibility for each other as much as we are taking responsibility for ourselves, you see?
That's very beautifully said. Yes, we all of us have to take that responsibility. Yeah,
And it
absolutely.
is a must. It is now, it is becoming so, it's becoming so important to take that responsibility, because every year our rates are being, and whatever people say things like is becoming more reported. That's the reason the rates are looking more reported or not reported. We know that the world is going through a very stressful phase, and it's important that we be alert to losing people.
Yeah, I mean, I was very surprised with the student data, which came up. And I said, oh, is this what our students are going through? So much of stress that they are feeling the need to do something like that. What's,
Absolutely.
what's your
Absolutely.
view on this? I mean, how do
Yes. Oh, yes, of course. Our world of occupations is becoming complex. Access to higher education is becoming complex. Family systems are becoming more nuclear. Family systems are becoming more, more sparse. Friend systems are becoming more digital. uh, there is more emphasis on success and achievement. There's so much of emphasis on success and achievement. So sometimes I actually contradictory and paradoxically say that, we need to come to a time and date where, we don't ask each other how well are you doing in your job. It's that's the least. How did you spend your last 10 days? How happy were you? What were the new things that you want to do in life? What is your bucket list? Who are you feeling, who do you feel very happy meeting? What were your happy moments in the last 1 2 months? These are very important questions to ask at a social function and gathering. But what happens is we talk about achievements to the extent that we actually ignore the others. It doesn't mean that don't talk about achievements, don't talk about how your career is going. But tell me one thing, if someone is asking how is your career going, and it's, my career is going pathetically, assumingly, how many of us are going to feel, अरे मेरी वाट लगी हुई है, I'm not succeeding, I'm not going up the ladder? Unless you're very, 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 very close, you're going to tend to say, wonderful, fantastic, I just did a brilliant presentation, and I'm not going to be able to talk my heart out. But how many of us will actually feel like sharing and say, hey, what's your bucket list? And how many connections, psychological connections, can increase? We require to look at it at a broader picture, not just jump in when you see signs and symptoms. Look at the broader picture. Stop talking about achievements. If there is a successful person in your successful is financially successful person in your family, stop talking excessively about that person. Talk about people who haven't in the ca- in the conventional way done great things about in life. Let's just talk about a person who has done nothing in their life that is conventionally great, but is actually just tending to a dog and really being happy. We don't tend to talk about them. And why not? So, if you're talking about social and family responsibilities, family and social responsibility starts at the prevention level, not at the correction level. The correction level, it becomes urgent. It's a firefighting. You must absolutely do, and you have no option but to carry it out. But start thinking about how you're going to build your family system. When you're going to go to the, your Ganpatis are going to come, right? You ask Ganpati, mujhe bahut yash dena. Don't ask Ganpati all that, ask them how to start connecting to people. Ask them, pray for, if you're an astic, if you want to pray for connections, pray for the ability to empathize, pray for the ability to have better family systems, strengthening, core connections with people, which is what the youth are experiencing deficit in. So wherever they, for example, go, questions as to how you're doing in your college, it starts from that, right? पढ़ाई करता है क्या, क्या बनना चाहता है? It's a very typical question that is asked to most of the children who are growing up, and that's one very, very lethal trend and pattern, because they think that if you don't talk to youngsters about responsibility and occupational greatness, etc., etc., they are not going to do well. As if you are the motivation in their occupational greatness. You aren't. Their own motivation is already there. You do not have the responsibility to motivate the youth. You have the responsibility to be their safe space. You have a responsibility to have, them to have you in your corner, you to have them in the corner, whatever the saying goes, right? But your responsibility is for you to be the safe aunt, safe uncle, safe grandpa, not the one who motivates. So if you think that you are a brilliant motivator, you might be, and that might be great, but also start building other very, very core uh, core skills of ensuring that our young people are safe. So that's a very important responsibility to follow. And just because we are speaking about young people, this is a very important thing we do while we are working with young people. So we follow this very, very closely. The communities that we work this is the WHO's Thrive Toolkit for youngsters, adolescents. They can be adapted very well to Indian scenarios also. And these are the four pillars: individual, family, community, and society. Individually, at the individual level, helping them build problem solving, and ensuring that they have great emotional intelligence in terms of intelligence skills, self-worth, self-esteem. And like I just talked about, self-esteem and self-worth does not come from achievements. It do- it comes only for the 5% of people who are achieving well. What about the 95% who, according to you, conventionally aren't doing really well? What happens to their self-esteem and their self-worth? Because you are all anchoring, we all are mostly anchoring self-esteem and self-worth in not how well people are living, but how well people are doing. So that's a shift, an important shift in terms of adolescents. So at the individual level, helping them build solving skills. If you're an aunt and uncle and grandpa and grandma, standing by them when they're being bullied, they're putting them down. Be a hero. If you see it, say it. So so if you see any bullying and any putting down, say it. If you see it, say it. Do not get scared about putting your foot down and say, hey, don't humiliate this kid. If they're not, I mean, don't speak about their weight. You talk about, immediately say, kitna patla ho gaya, kitna mota ho gaya. Be a hero. Communicate to others that this is not something that you need to. It is not your lookout at all. That's not your responsibility. You only have two responsibilities: is creating a safe place for them and nurturing them, or giving them nurturing environment. Those are your two responsibilities. All the other things, kids will manage themselves. So at the individual and family level, that's what we certainly need to do. Community and society level, we must try and push more attempt in how media is reporting, for example, suicide. Simple things as changing words like committing to completed the act, not using words as succeeded, suicide, or things like that. They say things in terms of the whole media training in not at all showing the means, which they are getting more and more sensitive to. It has now become a policy. Most countries, you are not allowed to show the means with which the suicide was completed. So that's an extremely important step, and that's a very positive step. So those are the kinds of things that at the media level we require to really actually emphasize and do. One of the things that actually is absent is at school level or college level, helpline numbers are really not available. There are some few ICALs doing really well, some are really, really doing well. But we require more really rigorous and very, very rigorous attempt to change that. So individual, family, community, and society are the four pillars. And these are the things that we can actually, and we can all pick up just one, right? We don't require to be responsible for taking responsibility of each and every sectorial development. Each one of us, our communities can say, hey, can we just volunteer 10 parents, train ourselves, and go and sit in the school center where people can talk if they want to talk, because after all, schools are also struggling with resources, right? So at a community level, at your family level, can parents be trained to just go twice a week, once a week, and be there for children if they want to talk about emotional thoughts? One of the things that they are experiencing are rejection. Romantic rejections are something that they're experiencing so commonly. Can they talk about romantic relationships without my this auntie uncle saying that, "Eh, this is not your age? Okay, tell my hormones, all right, that this is not my age." So without getting into the judgmental, argumentative, trying to change them. Okay, so what is your experience? Okay, how are you going to deal with it? What are your coping skills? Do you want help with your coping skills? And be confidential about it. Do not communicate to their parents saying, "Hey, your daughters told me that she just had a breakup in affairs. Your daughter's having an affair." So maintain complete confidentiality about that conversation, and kids should absolutely feel that this aunt or this uncle is not going to break my trust. But if you experience or know that they're going to harm themselves, That's the time you break your confidentiality. That's the time you absolutely communicate to people they care for, who care for them, which means parents need to be notified if you find out anything that they are talking about in terms of harm. Till then, no confidentiality breaking at all. So that really might help, and it helps. In fact, our communities have had far lesser average rate of any kinds of ideations or attempts than the national average. So you know that attempts or work that your community work that is done actually works. It's working in small pockets, therefore it's not affecting the national averages. But if there are more pockets created, I'm sure the national average will also actually improve. So the simple statement is wherever efforts are being put, their rates are substantially lower than national rates. Like we have now, of course, we are actually moving towards another important project within our foundation. But in the last 5 years, of course, my personal tragedy was immense. But within the communities, we have had only three ideations that actually went into attempt. It did not even go into completion. So we know that it is drastically different than the national average. So remember, communities, if you put effort, you may not immediately see the result, but if you put efforts, and if efforts are structured, the frameworks are sound, and your methods and techniques are even fairly okay, you will be able to make a real strong dent on these numbers.
So even when you say I mean, I had got these 4 pillars which you're talking about, but the importance of the schools and the education process which is there today. Don't you think there is a need for it also to change the way things are today?
Absolutely, but the problem is the resources. There is 0.003 uh, psychologist, psychiatrist available for every person needing it. So even if these schools are really, really capable of or want to, they
Mhm.
don't have the resources. So training people who are non-professionals is an extremely important, and who will train them? Again, you require professionals to train the non-professionals. So it is, so one of my friends was saying, अरे साहब यहाँ posters लगा दो, सबको recognize होने दो कि suicide क्या होता है, उसके बाद क्या? Poster में क्या लिखोगे? What will you write in the poster? That if you're experiencing suicidal ideations, go where? Right? So the schools, of course, is important, but what do we do at the school level? Can communities help these schools which are again struggling with resources to be able to bridge that gap that they have? That's a very important question that we at community level can raise, and your organization, who's doing such a great job, can actually try and see if we can do that at the family levels.
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from, and completely agree with you that yes, the community has to step up and take this forward to
And
help.
when I mean, sorry to interrupt, but when I say community, of course, school is also community, right? So in
Okay,
itself, that community is also, school is also community. But to affect it at a policy level is going to be tad difficult unless we have that solution.
correct. Absolutely right. Yeah. Now I request Dr. Sachin to take over this conversation on the community level a little more and also the environmental factors. Yeah. Over to you, Dr. Sachin.
Hi, Sachin.
Thank you, Saraswati. Thank you for starting the conversation. Thank you, Supriya ma'am, because this is a very difficult topic, and I think all the points mentioned by you are very pertinent. I think you have also answered a few questions and answers while actually explaining about the media communities, but I just wanted to again ask you these questions. What impact do social media and digital platforms have on mental health and suicide prevention? How do you think the portrayal of suicide in the media affects perception and awareness? And the second question, I think you have been answering, but I will just also put it in this question, is how can communities come together to create a more supportive environment for those at risk?
Okay, so let's take the first question. There is more and more research is coming in right now. Though there is an opinion, and there is a feeling and intuition that digital platforms aren't doing so well for students and youth and etc. etc. But more and more substantial data that's getting scientifically validated is just starting, because now we have that substantial data to see whether it's a digital platforms that have affected the rates, or is a general alienation because of which digital platforms have flourished. So what is coming first, whether the chicken or the egg, the digital, nothing will flourish unless there is a fertile land, right? So why has the digital platform flourished so much? Because of the general alienation that's present in the society. And then of course it accentuates the alienation by making yes, so the digital platforms have alienated them further. That having said, there is some evidence that is seeping in saying that digital platforms also give people some access to help, which means that reaching out on Instagram, reaching out on DM, reaching out on things that people, especially people who were farther away from populations. We are thinking about only urban youth right now, but think about rural youth who used to be actually not exposed to or not in connection with what's happening in the world. They're getting more connected. So there is of course a lot of need for more and more research where there is alienation that's happening because of digital platforms. There's also connection. Remember one thing, that people at risk, uh, if I'm at risk, then certain kinds of things like digital platforms will actually have a negative effect. It doesn't have an effect on people who are not at risk. Means digital platforms don't put you at risk. They actually might accentuate your risk, but they don't put you at risk. If you're emotionally healthy, if you've got problem solving abilities, digital platforms will not do too much. However, bullying on digital platforms or trolling on digital platforms is equal to what bullying happens in real life. Equal means it will have equivalent effect on people, and in fact worse, because on a digital platform the protective factors are less. So if there is bullying on digital platform, and if there is trolling and bullying on digital platform or trauma, it will have similar effect as trauma and bullying in real life. But in itself, digital platform is not proving to have the kind of demonizing that's happening with digitization. It's in fact actually bridging gaps. It's actually encouraging, empowering us to be able to give resources. We have been able to read so much resources because of the digitization of the whole thing. So all WHO resources are all digital resources, and they are so available. CDC's resources are available. So if you're looking at digital platforms like just Instagram and Facebook, we're looking at, of course, they're very powerful in terms of the influence that they are having on the at-risk people. But we need to look at it at a broader picture. That are there any compensatory digital things that are happening in human beings' lives, where they can reach for help quicker because of the digitization itself. Right? I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that's an interesting observation that I think digital medium has helped people actually reach to remote places. And I think that was also a very good point, mentioning that I think people in rural areas who did not have exposure to all this material has actually got a lot of help from the digital medium. And if you're emotionally sound and healthy, then I think digital mediums actually don't really affect you. I think they are more accentuators as such. And I think this one more important point was, I think because we have become more detached and lonely, or maybe I think more nuclear. So I think that's why people have started using more digital medium to actually maybe a Facebook or Instagram, etc.
That's true. I will add here, of course, digital media like Instagram and Facebook are created to make it addictive. So it has actually accentuated the at-risk and the nuclearization for sure. I'm not denying that it's all rosy. For certainly they make it addictive. The algorithms are very addictive, and that's something that we need to tackle. But that's also something that it's a part of our problem. So we need to
No,
do that.
I and Saraswati had a session with Dr. Narasimha from NIMHANS last month, where we actually spoke about addiction, and we also like looked at this behavioral addiction, and we're trying to find out whether social media is becoming really addictive or not. So right now he mentioned that it's not come to the level of addiction as per definition, but definitely I think people are getting more and more hooked to social media. I will just continue with the next questions as with Saraswati, you were discussing the policies and laws, environments, and in the diagram here mentioned individual, family, community, and society. So what are the effective suicide prevention strategies or programs you have seen worked well? And how do we create a world where mental health is prioritized and suicide rates are reduced?
Okay, let's take the first question. In our practice, in the way that we are working, the gatekeeper work that we do. Who's a gatekeeper? Anybody who, it's like, just imagine that the person is standing in a on at the end of the gate and telling you, no, don't go that side. So that person is gatekeeper. So anybody who's preventing you from taking an action that is detrimental to yourself or someone is a gatekeeper. Right, so it's a great the gatekeeper trainings work fantastically well in suicide prevention all over the world, not just in our missions, but helping gatekeepers identify early signs, helping gatekeepers understand what kind of actions they can take. Advanced gatekeeper communities actually are create volunteers where families can reach out to these gatekeepers and ask them for resources. These gatekeepers volunteer to take people to mental health professionals, be there with them, talk to them, do their initial intervention. Literally a first aid intervention. They carry out first aid intervention. So basically, a good gatekeeper program in our practices have shown really fantastic outcomes. That's one. Secondly, creating community awareness. So awareness programs have also shown a very, very good result. Though the amount of effort and resources that are required are not being put because of obviously number of people that are there that are less, but awareness programs and gatekeeper programs will do fantastically well if we actually strengthen the thread of these gatekeepers.
Yeah, okay. What message of hope would you like to share with listeners who might be struggling right now?
Yeah. So one of the things that I certainly tell people is there is always hope, right? The loss of hope is extremely critical to understand the psychological phenomenon. I will certainly tell them that hold on, hang in there. Uh, uh, do not take any action at all. Don't take any action. Just move away from action. Right now, you might be experiencing an intense need to act on your experience of pain. Remember, you want the pain to end. It might be looking like to you that you want your life to end, but it is the pain that you want to end. And if you want your pain to end, remember, pains are as temporary as any other emotion and happiness is. Your problem might not go away, but also remember that problems can be solved with added resources. Like I said at the beginning, you don't have resources right now. There is hope that new resources will get created. Your family might not be supporting you. Other resources, people have been able to create and erect more resources than they have been able to imagine. Like think about people who have come from really challenging family situations. For example, I work with a lot of communities who are maybe have had a community with transgenders, and they have been able to really manage very complex situations. That doesn't mean you're weak because of which you're not managing it. Remember, right now you are in an emotionally traumatic state. Remember, it is right now you are in an emotionally traumatic state. This can end and this will end. We require to just figure out the resources. So hang in there and look for resources. If you don't have the energy to look for resources, just do not act. And you'll start feeling a little more energetic to look for those resources in a little while. Reach out, talk to someone, pick up that phone. Just pick up that phone. It could be a friend who's extremely critical. Any help is better than no help. Pick up that phone. Tell your friends that you're feeling really down, even if you don't feel the energy to tell them that you're thinking about suicide. You use words that you think that people will be able to, reach out to you and get access. So pick up that phone, talk. Talking saves lives. So just talk to someone. Don't hesitate talking. If there's one friend who can't listen, talk to someone else. There's always going to be someone who might be able to help you to understand yourself in terms of your emotions right now. And there is help available. There is help. It's that it's not as accessible, but there is help available.
No, absolutely. Wonderfully well said. Because as you were mentioning, I was just going back where one is seeing famous actors dying by suicide, or I think giving them resources and providing the help is very, very important. So thank you, I think, for reiterating this. And the last question, which we just wanted to ask is, what do you hope listeners take away from your story and this podcast episode?
I just hope that they volunteer more. I just hope that if you think that my life is meaningless, I don't have anything to do, just get up and go to your nearest school. Talk to the principal and say, I'm going to be available from Monday to whatever on Monday, 3 to 5. Make a small, if you don't even, if you can't print out, write down on this that I'm there, I'm non-judgmental, and this will stay confidential. These 3 lines are enough. Start putting small schedulings with the school systems. If you, there are hundreds of people saying, मुझे पता नहीं मेरे time के साथ मुझे क्या करना है. Really? I mean, there's so much to do. I'm not judging you, but I'm just saying that we're just not creative enough to understand that there's so much to be done to bridge this gap, right? That's one thing. Second thing is that the second thing that I certainly want to communicate is that a lot of people who are in pain go to their general practitioners first. They go to their doctors first, dentists, doctors. उनको बोलते हैं पता है मुझे पता नहीं बहुत heavy हो रहा है. So we do a lot of general practitioners training. We don't train them really, but we tell them how to put posters in their clinics. And a lot of them have put posters in their clinics that talk about your thinking. Anybody can experience pain. So just reach out. And the general practitioners then go and report it to volunteers and gatekeepers. So we have left gatekeeper numbers and volunteer numbers in the general practitioners clinics, and they call them. So to everyone who's listening, just volunteer. If this suicide prevention is not your passion, do something that will actually give you meaning. And I always tell people, though even I sometimes complain, but translate complaints into actions. That's the only way that we'll be able to make this place a better place for ourselves when we're old and the next generation. That just translate all your complaints into either requests or actions. Uh, that's a very important lesson I have inculcated in myself. I rarely complain. I complain, but I rarely complain. I translate it into a request or action. So translate everything that you think is wrong with the world into action. It doesn't matter that it has to be a big action. You don't have to go to the beach and clean all the plastic out. They don't require to do that. But you can just talk to your society people to just separate the gila kachra from the sukha kachra. These are small acts, and small acts are, we call them everyday angels. Everyday angels actually are running the world. The world is not being run by these big machineries. Everyday angels run the world. They keep your trains clean. They keep your trains moving. They're keeping your platforms clean. These are everyday angels. They're doing their job. So everyday angels are far more, effective than these over the top major things that happen in the world. Everyday small joys are far more important than these once in a while big joy that we experience. So just start accumulating these everyday small joys. Encourage adolescents and youth to start experiencing these small joys. They are very, very more important, very much more important than helping them achieve great things in life, right? So hope this helps.
Yeah, thank you, Supriya, ma'am. And I think conversation with Saraswati earlier, where you mentioned, where you shared your presentation, which looked at the risk factors and also the supportive factors and QPR and how actually communities can help, looking at students and how actually they can handle themselves and how they can actually seek help, and what could happen in education and workplaces, and how actually communities can handle this. So I think thank you. And I think the last point which you mentioned is, I think for us to actually start taking action whenever we have questions like this. Thank you very much for your time, because this is a very difficult topic, and it's a topic of utmost importance in our country, which is not spoken a lot. So thank you very much for throwing light, sharing what you are doing, and discussing with me and Saraswati about all these points, which we also will try to implement in our practice, in our workplaces, and in our communities around us. Thank
Please
you very
reach
much
out.
for your time.
And please reach out in case you need any more help, and we would be happy to. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you
It was
so
a
much.
pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Saraswati.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure. Thank you, sir. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.